In 1964, the Surgeon General published a paper arguing that smoking cigarettes kills us. Many people did not believe him, especially since the tobacco company started a campaign arguing that his claims have nothing to do with real medicine, it's all nonsense. Despite that, the campaign against smoking was a huge success. In 1964, 42% of American adults were smokers. Today, the number dropped down to 11.5. Just think about all the lives that were spared, all the illnesses that were prevented, and the cost that was saved to treat these illnesses. 2023, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy published a paper in which he argues that there is an epidemic that is killing us, and more than that, severely hurting our well-being as individual and as a collective. And this epidemic is loneliness. Now, I know that the connection between cigarettes and death is much clearer than the connection between loneliness and death. But the medical community supports it. Lonely people are 29% more likely to get a heart attack. Lonely people are 32% more likely to get a stroke, and lonely people are 50% more likely to suffer from dementia. Dr. Murthy tells us that the damage of loneliness is equal to the damage of smoking 15 cigarettes a day, which means that it shortens our life expectancy in at least 10 years. Some even say 15 years. Loneliness and isolation kill us. But for people who are familiar with Jewish tradition, it doesn't sound like an hyperbole. We know that. The Talmud 15 years ago put it very clearly. O chavruta o mituta. Either having friends or you'll die. And they lived accordingly. The most severe punishment that the Jewish community inflicted upon people was excommunication. They didn't touch them, but they just kicked them out of the community. No friends, nobody to be with, to hang out with, to talk with. For them, it was equal to capital punishment. And who taught them that? Well, the best teacher, God. The word against loneliness is the first negative statement in the Bible. When God created the world, everything that God made, he said, it's good. Use the word tov. But after God created man and realized that there is only one, God said, lo tov, heyot ha'adam levado. This is not good for a man to be by himself. And God created a woman for him. There's a beautiful midrash that somebody asked, but how did God know that it was bad for a man to be by himself? And the answer is beautiful. That because God is lonely. Remember the prayer that we just sang? Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. God is one. And God realized that, you're God. You have to be one. But for human beings, it's not enough. Even if you feel really close to God, you need other human beings. It's a physical need. So the entire system of observing Jewish life was planned around the idea that we will never be by ourselves. We just did the vidui, the confession. Did you realize that everything was done in plural for sins that we have? I hope that nobody has committed all these sins, but we confess as a group. Many of the prayers we cannot say unless we have a minyan, a group of people. It's not that God cares how many people say the Kaddish, but can you imagine you lose a loved one and then you stand by yourself to say the Kaddish? Perhaps you can imagine, because during the pandemic, that's something that many people did, and that really hurt. But we need other people to be with us when we lose someone, when we are ill, when we are happy, all the time. There is a beautiful prayer that we say every morning that lists the most important mitzvot, most important good deeds and commandments. First one is kibud av va'em. Take care of the relationship with your family members, because they are the closest people to you. And you need to work on this relationship. We know how easy it is to break even these relationships. Then the second one is gmilut chasadim, is performing acts of loving kindness towards other people. They need it and you need it. I'll talk about it in a few moments. Hashkamat bet midrash. Studying Torah is really important, but don't do it in your house with your own books. Go to the Bet Midrash, go to the study hall, do it with other people. Those of us who study Torah in a yeshiva, we know you never study by yourself. You always have a partner. We use the Aramaic word chavruta. Never by yourself. Bikur cholim, visiting the sick. Even if you don't know them well, you go. Levayat hamet, funerals. You don't let people mourn alone. And the next one is achnasat kala, or to rejoice alone. You have to go to weddings. You will never allow a couple to get married by themselves. Even if you don't know them well, you go. You help them to celebrate. V'ashkanat shalom ben adam lachavero, and making peace between people. Because we don't want anyone to be lonely. But it's not only the physical damage that happens when we are lonely. It's the mental one. People who are lonely are prone to anxiety, to depression. And here's the thing, the longer you suffer from it, the harder it is to get out of it. Loneliness changes your brain. The neurotransmitters that help us to make connections with others, when we don't use it, they go bye-bye. Now, the good news is that the brain can restore itself, can learn how to connect. But this is serious stuff. And we're in a habit of not being with other people, not considering others. It's one of the main explanations why our society is so polarized. This is one of the explanations why hate crimes rising so fast, and especially hate crimes against us, anti-Semitism. ADL just reported that last year, anti-Semitism surged 36%. So there is a very strong correlation between loneliness and hate crimes and polarization in the society. Now, what is this loneliness? Loneliness is not the same as being alone. Almost a third of Americans live alone. Many of them are really happy doing that. They enjoy their relationship with family, with friends. They like to live alone. At the same time, there are many people who live with spouses, with partners, with children in the house who feel very lonely. Because lonely is not about how many people we see. It's about the quality of the relationship. So when we feel that our connection with others does not meet our expectations, we feel lonely. And this is a biological feeling like thirst or hunger that signals to us, you have a problem. You have to do something about it. This is not a new problem. It started a decade, 2 decades ago. That's when it really accelerated. And of course, the pandemic didn't help. The image that I have in mind is a scene that I've seen at least in a dozen movies, and I'm sure you know. So you see a person trying to neutralize a bomb. And on the bomb, there is a timer. And in the beginning, just the seconds go down, second by second. And then the person cuts the red wire instead of the blue wire, and then what happens? It starts going down really, really fast. And that's what the pandemic did to us. Things were really bad in terms of isolation before the pandemic, and then we're told, you have to isolate yourselves. And even after the pandemic, I know that not everyone would agree with this definition after, but let's just, for the argument of this sermon, things did not go back to where they were before. People don't socialize the way they used to. People don't go to places the way they used to. So much more loneliness. It really depends how you ask the question, but about half of Americans say that they feel lonely all the time or sometimes. This is huge, and it affects everyone. Poor and wealthy, married and unmarried, young and old. Actually, the group that is affected the most are the 15 to 24 years old. You say, they go to school. No. This group, in the last few years, the time they spend with friends went down, listen to that, 70%, 70. And it's not that they use that time to hang out with their parents or siblings. They spend the time being by themselves, with a screen probably. It affects everyone. And the other problem is that for some reason, we feel shameful about it. So it's very hard for us to admit we are lonely. We can talk about many illnesses and diseases and surgeries, but this is something that we just don't feel comfortable talking, so we prefer not to do something about it. And the longer we wait, the harder it becomes. So what can we do about it? Now, I gave you a lot of statistics today, and I assume that you believe to what I said. Why wouldn't you? But now I'm going to give you some statistics that I'm asking you to look it up because it just serves my purposes too well. Here it is. People who attend religious services regularly live on average 4 more years. Right? You think I just made it up. Please look it up. And this is not a high estimate. Now, some people may think that this is God's way to reward those who go to services. Yeah, I'm a rabbi, so I should agree with that. But the scientists believe that it's mainly because people who regularly go to services are not lonely. They meet people on a regular basis, and they have many opportunities to serve others, which I will talk about it in a moment. So come to services. But one of the main causes that loneliness became so prevalent in America is really because people stopped going to churches. This is a major factor in it, and definitely synagogues. The other thing is that people are not likely to join clubs the way they used to. They don't play in sports leagues. Right? It's the title even of Professor Putnam's famous book is Bowling Alone, where he argues that people still go bowling, but they used to belong to bowling leagues, and now we just go by ourselves. So we used to have many groups where we are part of these groups, and now we don't. Find a group. Call a person almost every day. Take 15 minutes a day. That's what Dr. Murthy, the Surgeon General, did. Because in his, if you read, it's online, the full report, the shorter report. But he's really open and honest about it because he got into a deep depression because of loneliness. So he explained what happened to him and how he's working, or how he worked and still working, to get out of it and to avoid it in the future. So every day he sets up 15 minutes to call to people. It makes you feel connected. But when you talk to people, be fully present. Don't put your cell phone on speaker and answer your emails. You may fool the other person by saying, yeah, sure, wah! But you won't fool your brain. Your brain will not feel connected to others when you're not fully in the conversation, when you're not giving your full attention to the other. Serve others. Volunteer. Again, that's not a rabbi's thing. People who serve others are less likely to feel loneliness, not just because of the interactions, but because they feel that they contribute something to the world. They are needed. They feel much better about it. A few years ago, I still remember a conversation with a wonderful lady. You know, she was very generous, and one time we talked and she told me, when I was younger, I used to do a lot of things here at the temple. But now, I just write checks. Well, I thanked her because God knows that we need people to write checks. But had I had a conversation with her recently, I would have tried to tell her, please write your checks, but don't stop working, volunteering, being part of anything you want. Other people need it, but you need it more than they need it. Those of you who work from home, and the pandemic sent many people home, just be aware of the price that is attached to it. It's wonderful when you don't have any commute, but definitely help to the rising percentage of loneliness in our society. And the last thing I'll mention is the importance of acquaintances, or what they call weak relationships. Just relationships with coworkers, with classmates, with members of your synagogue or church. These are shallow relationships, but in many ways they are wonderful. They're easy, no reciprocity, there are no demands on you. And scholars found out that people who have many of them, here quantity is really important. They feel good, they don't feel lonely. And for years, I didn't know about that reason, but I just learned to enjoy it. When I go to Publix, now I know several of the cashiers, I would wait in line much longer to go to Carol. Because when Carol is there, we strike a conversation. I know that she moved from Jupiter to Port St. Lucie. I know that she walks 10 miles every single day because the doctor told her to walk 5, but she's better than what the doctor said. She asks me about my son because at one point my son Yoni used to walk for hours every day and they would see each other. So whenever I go to Publix, and I do it quite often, I, like Carol, and I know other people, and these small connections. You know, she did not invite me to her daughter's wedding, but you know what? I leave the store with a smile, and hopefully she feels good too. And this is just a small example of how important this weak connection, I don't like this definition, but that's the official one, or peripheral connections, if you will. I don't know if it sounds any better. My friends, many people did not believe the Surgeon General in 1964 and continued to smoke for many, many years. It took more than 20 years to learn that not only the smokers paid the price, but also those who live with them, the secondhand smoking. Well, loneliness does not affect only the people who feel isolated, but the people around them, their family, their community, our country. With so many people not connected to others, being polarized the way we are, we're much weaker. It's much harder for us as a society, as a country, to face challenges. You know, in 3 countries already, they have a minister of loneliness. It started in England before the pandemic, 2018, Sweden, Japan, because they realized that it's killing people and it's killing the societies. In the next year, my prayer is that we will realize that we are accountable for other people's well-being, and we will realize that we hold the key to other people's healthy and long life as they hold the key to our healthy and long life. Our tradition tells us that Kol Israel arevin ze lazeh. All the people of Israel, all the people of the communities in which we live are responsible for each other. We have an epidemic. We are responsible for everyone around us to get better, to get healed. This is easy if we do the right things. Let's turn the next year into a year of fighting loneliness and isolation, a year of coming together for any kind of endeavors, strengthening relationships. Shana Tova, Chatima Tova.